Hello. Hi, I'm Martha, and this is the Sgraffito demo. I make a few adjustments. So for the next little while, we're going to be talking about how to decorate ceramics with the surface decoration, which is called the Sgraffito process. And we'll wait for some more people to join us before we get going. So I'm Martha Manikas-Foster, and this is, as you know, for 171 Cedar Art Center. And for those of you who want to practice your Italian, this is what we're talking about. Is that backwards for you? Okay. Let me know if you're here so I know if I'm doing this right.
It might not start until 1, I don't know.
Hello there. How are you? Let me know if you're here or who's here by putting something in the comments. Hello, Jason. This is the Sgraffito demo. And I'm not sure, is that backwards for you? But Sgraffito comes from the Italian for scratch. It's the same root, I believe. It comes from the same root as graffiti, graphic. And what we're going to be doing is watching a demo of the Sgraffito process. And I'll go through this again in a few minutes, but Sgraffito is what gives us this kind of decoration when it's on dark clay, because we're putting color on top, and then we're by our scratching in the Sgraffito, we reveal the darker clay underneath all of the color we put on top. So something quite similar on top of a white clay looks like this. So similar design, but you're revealing the darker clay here and you're revealing the lighter clay here. So let's see. I know Jason is watching. Anyone else? Let me know by putting a comment in. Let me know where you're listening, how many people are watching. Excuse me a second.
Do you know what I hit to listen?
I'm going to break this down into basically two different Sgraffito techniques that I use. And one is when I put color on top of clay, only one color, and then it reveals, of course, the clay underneath, but it gives you something like this. So this is just black put on top of white clay, and so it's revealing the white in the design. And you'll get the same kind of idea with something like this. So white clay, purple is on top, and then you reveal, it's two-tone, right? Because you're revealing the clay that's underneath. Another example of just using one color on top of the clay is this. And we'll talk about this a little bit later because the quality of the lines of the scratching here is different and it gives a different effect. This also is basically just one color on top of the white clay. There's a little bit of accent with the dots, but we're really going with just two colors here. The clay color and then the one color that I put on top. And then one of the things that I really like to do, and is more subtle, is if the white clay that's underneath here, I have put a different color of white, in a sense, on top, and then gone through it. So it's white on white. But again, it's just the two tones. Another another example here with red. Also again with red. This might be a little harder to see. This is the yellow. See if we can get the glare off of that. But just again, just the one color on top of the white and then revealing it. Again, another red. And then I showed you earlier this white on white. Right. This was white clay, like Amanda just said in the comments, white clay, purple on top, and then carving away and revealing the white that's underneath. Not touching. What you see is purple here wasn't touched by the carving. And then back to the white on white, which is this more subtle, this is also the technique that's right here in the center. Obviously, there's something different around the outside, but this is white on white. It's actually a kind of gray clay, even though I'm calling it white initially. Porcelain slip, which is basically watered down porcelain clay on top, and then in carving through, it shows a very subtle distinction between the two kinds of white. And then this is something I work with much more than anything else, which is white clay, porcelain, black on top, carving away, revealing the white, right, and leaving behind the black to make the design. So these are both using just black color on top of white clay and then carving away. That's scratching, that's sgraffito. Okay? So what color clay you use underneath makes a difference on what the impact is going to be, and also maybe your choices of color that you're going to put on top. So I'm going to show you two things that are quite similar to each other, but they're on different kinds of clay. So this right here, this mask I made, very, let's say, apropos to the times we're living in. This mask right here is white color, different colors of blue, and then carved away to this color clay back here. So you can see the revealing of the red brown color of the clay here. Now a very similar design, but it's revealing the white from behind it. So we have white on white, and it gets that, even though they're similar designs, right? They look quite different, I think. I have an assistant over here making faces at me. Excuse me a moment. Could you turn that so I can see it? Perfect. Wonderful. Can you hear me? There you go. Pardon me. So what we're going to do today, I'm going to take you through a very simple demonstration of how you would get these kinds of designs. So let me move apart all of these examples I have. Here's another one that uses two colors, okay? And let me do that now. I was showing you how one color on top of clay, scratching away the color, and then you end up with, right, just the two colors. You can also, of course, use more than that. So in this particular case, there are three colors. Hey, Debbie, good to see you. Thanks for joining in. So two colors on top of the white porcelain clay, carving away and revealing the white. And then you can also do, this is kind of a mixture. The top part here is Sgraffito. This is porcelain clay, white, with turquoise on top that I carved away in the Sgraffito process. But here, this is a regular glaze, which we're not going to really talk about today. But that's the glaze that is part of the high firing or higher firing process. So, but it's a way you can do a combination. So Sgraffito here, carving here, regular glaze here. And here's another combination where I use Sgraffito for the rim, right? But this is a regular high fire glaze, higher fire glaze, cone 6, and I've done the carving first. So I've combined Sgraffito with a high gloss glaze to come up with this particular design. So, and really, the possibilities are endless. I know that's a cliche. They are endless. Excuse me a second while I set us up for the demo part. So we're going to start out today with a piece of clay. This is porcelain clay, so it's white, and it's naked, okay? So I rolled it out. This is something you can do at home if you have any clay. I rolled it out. I used basically 2 rulers, 2 paint sticks on either side, rolled it out so it's relatively even in its depth. A little warped over here, okay? But right now, it is what we want to reach once we start digging in, once we start the Sgraffito process. So I'm going to put on top of it a colorant, which is going to be, in this case, a velvet underglaze. If you are at home without very many supplies, of course you can order this. But in a second, I'm going to show you something that you might be able to do without ordering something. Maybe, you know, a hack. So, but here is the velvet underglaze. And it's really nice to use a very soft bristle brush. And my goal is to make even coats across. And the first time I do it, I'm going to go across one way. And after this has dried, I will go across in another direction, not the same direction. So right now, what we have is this. And then you really want it to dry so that the next coat doesn't just push things across. Yes, so clayscapes and Sheffield Pottery are still taking orders, and because of the miracles of the way that we get deliveries, you can get this at home. So if you have some clay, or even if you order some clay, you could do what we're doing right here. So while we let that dry, and it's drying rather quickly right now, through the miracles of, I don't know, whatever baking shows do or cooking shows, I can bring one out now that actually has 3 coats that have appropriately dried. So just a second. Hey Greg, welcome! So right here, what you see is a piece of clay that is rolled out. It's never been fired. This is fragile. And it has 3 coats of an underglaze. So our goal in Sgraffito is that we're going to take a color and dig through it, in a sense, dig through it, so that we have some sort of effect like this. The first thing I'm going to be demonstrating is the single color way of doing, so monochromatic maybe, Sgraffito. So as with this particular vase, I formed it, and then I put black underglaze on it like I just did with the brush on this tile that we have. Put 3 coats on, and then I went ahead and put a design on it and carved away. So this particular piece of clay is, the goal is, it's called leather hard, and the goal is that when you're carving into it, it's like carving into a bar of Hershey's chocolate. Now you wouldn't do that because you'd want to eat it, but that's kind of the goal. If it's really soft, you'll dig a little bit too deep, and if it's really hard, you'll create dust, and it'll be hard actually to make a nice line. So you want that sweet spot, and that's one of the difficulties or the joys of being at home with your clay all the time these days, is that you can keep checking on it. Also, you can start fussing too much too, but that's quite another story. So how do I get a design from my head, let's say, onto here and then carve away? Well, there's a lot of different ways to do that. One of them is if you're just incredibly creative and it just comes pouring right out, right? But another way is to see a design that you like, draw it out, and then trace it. Or see a design that you see some sort of line drawing from a coloring book, or maybe from line art, copyright-free line art that you could find online. For me today, I'm going to take this cone flower. It's not a cone flower, it's a coreopsis, sorry. I'm going to take this, and I want to transfer it onto here before the design anyway, before we start carving. So what I'm going to do, very simply, is like a kindergarten skill of tracing. So what I've done is I've taken my leather hard piece of clay with the coating on top, and then I'm going to place it where I want it to be on the tile. And then I'm going to use a pencil, just a pencil. I also find that a ballpoint pen works. You really don't want it to be too sharp because we really don't want to dig through this, this piece of paper. We want to make a line. This is a turntable. It's actually called a banding wheel. You can imagine, let's just do a little demonstration. A banding wheel would be, hey Katie, welcome. You could take your color, right? And you could go around and make bands of color, which I believe is why it's called a banding wheel. So we're doing Sgraffito, which is a way of going through a color and revealing the clay color underneath. And so what I'm going to be doing right now is tracing this. So after I position my drawing on top of my clay, I am going to draw the lines, the outlines of what I want to carve. In some ways, you don't want to make a mistake because those lines will show all the way through the whole process. So one of the nice things to do, one of the good things to do, is to be as simple as possible in your tracing so that if you decide to change the design, you don't have some sort of detail that is left kind of with a little bit of an indentation. Welcome anybody who's watching. Let me know if you're here so I can feel the company that you're in, the support of you being here. So, as I said, I'm tracing this not too hard. I'm not pushing down too hard. If you have any questions along the way, I have a trusty assistant who has promised to read them to me. So,
I'm not getting any on my screen. I'm trying to see your screen to see if there's any questions.
so in my tracing, let's see if you can see this. Can you see this kind of lightly? Hi, Mitchell. Can you see this little bit of, a small indentation, right? So that's going to be my guide. Thank you very much. Never mistakes, only happy surprises. Yes, thank you, Katie. So I'm going to let this sit for just a minute while I talk about another possibility that you can do if you're at home with some clay, but you don't have any of these underglazes. So pause. We'll go down this other track now. So sometimes people who play with clay, like me for instance, break things. So this is clay that had been formed into a shape, but as you can see, it's broken. So it is not worth firing, right? But it's worth recycling. So what I did is I took a bunch of these kinds of mistakes. They've never been fired. They are basically what? Formed mud kind of thing, right? And then I crushed them. I'm not going to do that right now. It would make a bit of dust, and it's unnecessary for us to do that right now. But what I did is I pounded them outside, wearing a mask, pounded them until they were more like, almost like flour, dust, almost to the point of dust. And then I added a little bit of water, and I stirred and I stirred and I stirred. So what I got from that was this, which is called slip. So it's not the velvet underglaze. It's instead another thin coat of clay, but it does give you color. So if you have the chance to make some sort of a slip out of clay that you have around the house, dried up clay, and if it's in a contrast to the clay that you are working on, you can do this same thing. In this particular case, I had some brownish red clay. It really comes out more like a brown when it's fired. And I made it into a slip. And I want you to know, because I save way too many things, this is from my Susie Homemaker oven when I was 5. And it worked, laughter from the peanut gallery there. And it worked really well to stir this up. Okay, so it's not as fine a consistency as if we were at the studio and we had an immersion blender and we could really, really make it smooth. But hey, you're home, you have time, you can really just work with this and experiment, right? So if at home you have a contrasting kind of clay that you have dried out, then you can, or if you have it even in regular form and you can water it down in a way, you can make it into a slip. So that's also something that I did. So I took this slip and I put it on top of my gray clay, and I will be right back to show you what it looks like. So I did the same tracing of the same design on top of gray clay, ever thrifty, that's me, yep. And I traced it. So right now we have, in parallel, we have this reddish brown, actually clay, on top with the design of the coreopsis. And then we have the flower also traced onto the black, it turns out to be underglaze. Now what do you carve, what do you use to carve with, right? So there's lots of ways, lots of things that you can use to carve. I'm partial to these are Kemper tools, and I'm partial to the one with a point like this. So can you see that point? But these tools come with a variety of shapes. So you could make any kind of designs, or almost any kind of design, more of a channel, because you have this circle. Can you see that? Big circle, little circle. There's also a way of making, of indenting more with a flat area. This flat area, I made reference a little earlier to different ways of carving. I need you to turn that toward me. This flat area is what helped make this background here, okay? So it made it rougher, and it was easier to do with this flat one than with the pointed one that I usually use. But let's say you're at home and you were able to scrounge some clay and you were able to put a layer on top of, you know, a contrasting layer like I did here. So in addition to tools, or instead of tools like I have here, which you could use this to do the carving, or there are the stylus tool like this you could do, but let's say you have none of those, right? What you can use is, I just started using this today to see if it worked. This is what? Anybody know what it is? Let me know. Anybody? I'm supposed to wait 20 seconds for your answer, aren't I? Well, this is what it is. It's a bamboo skewer that you would use for shish kebabs, right? So what I did is I put part of the skewer into a cork, and you will be the first to know if this really works. Yes, skewer, very good. Very good, Sandra. So, and Manda. So I'm going to try right now, and you are my witnesses, to see if it carves through. Here. And it does. Now, this is true no matter what the tool you use is. It will be tempting to blow that away so it's out of your way. But it is very bad for your lungs for you to blow that. So try to wait, and then we're going to brush it off. I use what I call a kindergarten brush. So this kind of brush right here, and I usually get a piece of paper, which I did not provide for myself. Okay, a piece of paper, and I'm going to brush that off. And then I can see the line I'm making even better. So I'm going to continue to follow my line. Now, if I make a mistake, something like what the happy accident or there's no accidents or whatever it is that Katie said earlier, is that I may change my design if I end up making a line where I didn't want it to be. But take your time. This is so much fun, and I find it really relaxing because, I don't know, maybe it's because it's almost like tracing in kindergarten or something. I don't know. We're not going to get into the psychology of why I find this relaxing. So I'm following all of my lines. With my makeshift tool. So we know the makeshift tool can work. Allow me to attack the black one with a tool that I'm more familiar with. And of the tools, this is my favorite, as I mentioned earlier. The black, and then in this particular case, it's a gray clay, but the contrast I find really stunning. And now I have a flower here, but I haven't drawn, right, what I'm going to do in the background. And there are lots and lots of choices of what that background could be like. I could fill it up with other flowers, right? Or, as is more of my tendency, is I like to do lots of swirls, almost like the wind blowing. So, my tile, I can't find. I will find it eventually. But I tend to like to do swirls and, I guess they're swirls. Eddies, like eddies of the wind or something. How do you keep the lines smooth? I often get a little, yeah, okay. I totally get it. Now part of that might be that the clay is too wet, and then it's going to kind of jag in more. It's going to kind of stick. But I don't always get the line smooth. So there's the stylus here. What I find is on times when the clay is a little too wet, or let's say the tool, when you use these tools a lot, they get very thin at the point. I do try to get all of my line depth in one pass, yes. I find that sometimes when these get a little worn, they don't do an even line, I will go back over them with a stylus, and they make them, I'm trying to show you the ends here, they make them with different sized balls, and you can go back over and make it uniform. I mean, it means more work because you're going over once and then you're going back, but it's worth it for your end result, that you end up with this, well, more uniform look, right? Now, if this clay was too dry, I mean, you could still carve in it, but it was too dry, then you need to wear a mask. The masks, now we're all wearing masks these days, but that's the reason I've had any masks, is because paper mask, it could be a painter's mask, it could be a respirator, but you just don't want to get this into your lungs. So far you see on this black one what I've done so far for the flower. Pen caps. You know, I wonder if, you know the pointed end? Like this end? But what also would work is a pencil. So let me go back to this one here, where this is where we're doing our shortcuts or our hacks or whatever we have at home. Can you see how the pencil is working? Do I have it up here? Yeah. So I'm making many more of those little we have so many little names for this, but I don't know what the appropriate name is. But the dust, right? But if we promise not to blow them away, right, we can take care of them later. So it's a different, let me take care of this. It's a finer line with the pencil. But if you're uniform about it, so when you mean a pen cap, do you mean this, Jenny? Yeah, okay. So the pencil is a finer line than what I came up with this, but if you do it the same all the way around, yeah. So part of the question is, then what are you going to do with the background, right? And again, you could add another flower, a different kind of flower. If you were going to do that, it would probably be good to trace that at the beginning. Clay crumbs, yes. And all those other words that Amanda just volunteered, right? I need your help, honey. The next time. So this is the kind of background I think that I'll be working on. Is this, do you see the swirls that are here? I like to keep some of the color there while taking off most of it, right? I don't mean, what do I mean, right? Do you understand? Am I making myself clear? That's what I mean. Thank you. So as I continue with the carving, as I said, I'm thinking about what I'm going to do in the background. In this particular case, I'm going to like pretend there's a wind, or how would I illustrate the wind? Behind or around this flower. Now, one of the benefits of that is that, let's say I make a mistake and I don't follow one of these lines, and you can see it. So right now, let's see if I can get the light just right. Maybe not, but you can still see the lines, that the indented lines here. And let's say I did something on one of the petals and I didn't want to carve that out. And I can kind of erase it by making the background in such a way that it's no longer, the indentation's no longer there. So let's see. So in a very rudimentary way, the flower is done. And I would decide, let's say, to just freehand what's going to happen next, okay? So I may want to do, let's see, something like this. And then keep going. So that there are these swirls. And I'm just going to, in this particular thinking, just leave a little bit of the black so that mostly it's white when I'm done, the color of the clay. But instead of you watching me do this for the rest of the time, I'm going to show you another piece that I have started, and that we can talk about how I might go forward, or how I may plan to go forward. So hold on just a second. But you can see the beginnings of what I'm planning to do. Right now it just looks like the flower is spitting something, but that's not my intention. Hey, buddy.
Okay, got it finally. Okay, good.
I just need to know that I can ask you. You're not available. So what I've done so far is what I was showing you. What if we did just a solid color and we're revealing the color of the clay? So it's really just two colors, right? Well, what I also have done then, while I was getting prepared, is that I took gray clay. So it's the same clay that's behind the black. I put white slip on top, which is that watered down porcelain clay, which I brushed on. And then I used the velvet underglazes in color, right? In this particular case, a yellow and a turquoise. So unlike when I did it here, when I could have put that flower anywhere, right? When I started to trace and to carve, I could have put it anywhere. Here I had to decide ahead of time where that flower was going to be so I could put the color where I wanted it to be. Hi, David. Good to see you. So once again, I'm tracing according to the design that I had, I'm carving along the design that I had traced. And I'm revealing, in this case, the contrast looks incredible. When it fires, it won't be that dark. The clay that's underneath, because it's wet, looks like there's more contrast than there actually is. But this exact same design, the flower, and this exact same technique is the only reason that it's different is because I put color into the different parts of the flower here, and here I decided to kind of to carve it out of the solid black that was there, right? Any questions so far? Okay. Any more questions so far? So those are tiles, and those are basically tests. I mean, you can tile your kitchen with this, of course, in your bathroom. But generally speaking, I make vessels, and then I have decorations on the vessels. And so what I have done here is I have molded a plate. So this is a plate. But I like to put it back into the mold when I'm carving, when I'm doing the sgraffito, because I like the support that can give it, that I'm pushing down on something solid, because when a plate is cantilevered and you push down, it's possible that you could crack it. Something I wanted to show you is this. So this is from Amanda finding it on Pinterest. Amanda, was it on Pinterest? And you could make a wooden box, or you could purchase something, and I purchased this. It turns out it's not quite the right size, but the idea would be that when you made something cylindrical and then you wanted to carve it, you could lay it on here and not have to hold it up the whole time or hold it in your lap and scrunch over to carve, but that you could lay it right here and press down. It turns out it's just a little bit too wide for any of the vessels that I'm currently working on. But yeah, it's the cradle, Amanda. So right now, this is how it would look on the inside, how it does look on the inside. Because my vessels would actually fall through, this pipe insulation that I put on a store-bought container, I put the extra pieces inside to help. Yeah, it's not my idea originally, but I'm very happy to pass it along. So it may be that for the width of some of the vessels that I make, if I can't find another cradle, something else to make a cradle out of, it may be that I may be asking a friend or my dad to make something wooden, which is how Amanda first showed it to me, my friend Amanda, who is watching, who works at 171 Cedar Art Center, where you would have a piece of wood like this and two pieces that sit upward. And they would just have to be narrower than this. Yes, a pool noodle. Amanda's suggesting a pool noodle. I could take this off and add a pool noodle, right? And then it could be the different widths to make it narrower or wider. So this goes to what I was saying, is that I like having something I can press down on without feeling like I'm going to break the vessel. Thank you, able-bodied assistant. So in this particular case, with the plate, if I've molded a plate, rather than thrown a plate on the wheel, but if I've molded one, I like to put it back into the mold if I can, and then start to carve. So this is an example of the gray clay. Here, it's a stoneware with white porcelain slip, just like here. White porcelain slip. And then I know where I want the rose to be, and I know where I want these little flowers to be, and so I've already put 3 coats of the color on it. So what I'm going to do next is then really trace the outsides. I have found that it doesn't have to be one motion, but I do want it to be about the same thickness. As I was mentioning earlier, I can go back over it with another tool later to try and even out the thickness. And even though I'm calling this carving, you can go just through the color on top. You can not really go too deeply into the clay, because all you're really trying to do is reveal the color of the clay. And that's where every artist's kind of like signature, design, ability, not ability, that's not the word I want, signature, I think is what I want, will be revealed on how they actually approach what they take off. Oh, I'm glad, Jenny, that you're enjoying this. The part that I find very relaxing is the backgrounds when I make the swirls, in the particular cases of the ones that I generally default to the swirls in the background. So could I have that? Well, yeah, this is an example. So the swirls in the background here, that I find that really relaxing. So when I get my main focus taken care of, the in this case the dove, and then I start doing the swirls afterwards, I find that very, very relaxing. Thank you. And that's what I plan to do outside of the main focal point, which is the roses here, the rose. Now, I don't know if you can see, but parts of the brown parts of the flower, normally I wouldn't have made them brown, but I don't have very many underglazes here. I have some, but it wasn't like I stocked up because I was building a home studio where I was going to do all of this work. I enjoy going to 171 Cedar Art Center, and I enjoy the camaraderie that's there, but I happen to have some underglazes here, and I happen to be able to borrow some. One of the hacks is I could be using, and I will be using before this these times end, is that I've gone to a ceramics conference, and I've gone to ceramics stores, and sometimes you get samples. And it's an underglaze, right? So in addition to making my own slip in order to make this one, I can be using underglaze samples as well. It's not my favorite color, but it's an underglaze, and I could use it, and it's at my fingertips. So that's great. And then, of course, because even though we are isolated, we're still getting shipments of things, you can go ahead and order from a number of places. Amanda listed a couple, but the velvet underglazes from Amico that I really, really, really like. So, to go back to that. But again, at your own home, you might have a skewer or you certainly have a pencil, right? So now I'm taking away color from the center of the rose. And you can decide how detailed. The person who taught this to me, Colleen Carey McCall, who is absolutely wonderful and very generous in the way that she teaches. She first taught me by reducing flowers like roses down just to circles and simplifying them, stylizing them. And I found that a great way to be successful right at the beginning. And then since then, you know, I've taken on some other designs that I enjoy making. And as for those of you who may have joined a little bit later, this clay has never been fired, so it's fragile, right? Which is part of the reason that I enjoy carving this on top of the mold. This is plaster. There are other kinds of molds, but in this particular case, the plaster mold. I am making a number of bowls with designs that have this rose on it for the mosaic show that's part of Kaleidoscope, which is the 171 Cedar Art Center Gala that's coming up. And it was wonderful to be included in that and knowing that before the isolation began, because it's given me some things to do with a goal. Jenny, yes, I typically carve toward myself. You asked if I carve toward myself. I typically do. I think I have more control. If I'm going outward, I guess I'm afraid I'm going to flick with the tool. So, yeah, I don't know that I ever thought about it before, but yeah, I do. Aha. I'm getting to the end of the time that I'm supposed to be doing this. So do you have any more questions? And then I'm happy to answer them. And then when we're done with this, I will finish. And Jeanette, hi! I will post what I finished with the Sgraffito process on this same downline of the Facebook Live, and then you can see, you know, how it turned out, at least at this stage. We have to wait a while until it's fired, and then when it's fired, it will be matte. It won't be glossy, because these here are not glazes. They're closer to being like a clay, a colored clay. So then they get dipped into a clear, a transparent glaze to make them shiny. So this became shiny because after the Sgraffito process, hello Jeanette again, after the Sgraffito process, then it was put into a clear glaze and then fired. So the gloss on all of these is a second step in the second firing of the clay. So, but I will post what these look like once I get done with this part of the process, the at-home process, part of the process. I'll wait a few minutes for any more questions, and then we'll close this up. My able-bodied assistant over here, who's been very, very quiet, do you have any questions?
You hold that up for them to see.
Oh, this is what it looks like at this moment. Still a lot more to go. Any other questions? Okay, let me look at my notes for a minute. So, right, at the end of this, I'll finish what I call the carving of the Sgraffito, and then I will let it dry slowly. And in a sense, it's got different thicknesses. Thank you, Sandra, that's awfully nice to say. And then it's got different thicknesses, so I wouldn't want it to crack, and things can crack if you make a great deal of difference between some parts' thickness and how much clay there is for it to dry. So I will let them dry more slowly. And then, hey, thank you, Jenny. And then I will then cart them to 171 where they'll be fired. So as I said, the Mosaic show is coming back up. Hello, Bridget. There's also going to be summer camps, and when things start opening back up, 171 is going to be hopping again, including as many of the classes that it had to put on hold. So I hope that those of you who are somewhere in the Corning, New York area will consider going to one of the classes, going to the art show that's actually online right now. The gallery is closed, but you can see what's there, and all the other things that 171 does. So, okay. I think that's how we end this. Thank you very, very much for watching, and I will post what the results are here right on this downline. Okay? Yeah, I hope to see you again too, Debbie. I can't wait for 171 to open up again. Well, I can't wait for like the world to open up again. Bye-bye.